"Sir, if they come, hide my sister," the boy begged. His breath was ragged as wind. The cowboy didn't move. He just watched the horizon, where a trail of dust rose like smoke. His horse stamped once, restless. The noon sun burned low through the haze. The boy's hat was too big for him. His hands clutched a small wooden carving, a horse smooth from being held too much. He pressed it into the cowboy's palm. "She carved it," he whispered, "so you'd know she's real." The cowboy nodded once. His face was cut by shadow under his hat brim. He wasn't a man who promised lightly. They were standing outside an old barn near the dry creek bed. Beyond it, the world shimmered, gold dust, sage, and heat. A hawk circled overhead. The boy's voice shook. "They'll come from the ridge. Sheriff said the girl was stolen, but she's Apache. They won't listen." The cowboy looked at the trail again. His boots made no sound as he walked to the barn door. "How old is she?" 14. He opened the door just enough for light to spill inside. "Then she's not stolen," he said quietly. "She's surviving." The boy's eyes filled. "Please, don't let them find her." Inside the barn it smelled of hay and iron. A horse whinnied softly in the dark. The cowboy's gaze fell on a half-broken plow, a stack of rope, a rusted lantern, things left behind waiting. He looked back at the boy. "Go, keep low by the arroyo." The boy hesitated, then ran, small feet kicking up dust. The cowboy watched until he vanished behind the mesquite line. Then he took the carving from his pocket again, feeling the grooves. The horse was simple but alive, carved by small hands that believed wood could carry a soul. He tied it to his saddle with a thin strip of leather. The wind shifted. Far off he heard horses, many. He spat the dust from his mouth, checked his rifle, and whispered to the horse, "Time to stand, old friend." The sky was turning copper now. A crow called once from the ridge. The cowboy straightened, eyes steady on the coming riders. "Truth is to be seen," he murmured, "not run from." The wooden horse swung once in the wind, small, but strong enough to be remembered. "You can rest here," he told her. The girl's eyes darted like a trapped bird's. The barn was dim, gold dust floating in the beams of late sun. She was barefoot, her dress torn from running. Her wrists bore rope marks that were more story than wound. "I'm not staying," she said softly, her voice shaped by another tongue. "They'll come for me." The cowboy set down his rifle and nodded. "They'll come for anyone who looks like you," he said, "but not tonight." She stood near the light, watching it die slow through the cracks. Her face was calm, but her hands never stopped moving, twisting a piece of twine she'd found like she was braiding her thoughts. He poured water from a tin cup. The smell of the creek mud still clung to it. She drank in silence. "Your brother made something," he said, holding up the small wooden horse. "Said you carved it." She stared at it for a long time. "It was for our father," she said finally. "He died last winter." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "You carve well." She gave a small smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "I carve what I remember." Outside, a coyote called. The sound stretched over the valley like a prayer that had lost its words. He pulled an old blanket from the stall rail. "Sleep if you can," he said. "There's no shame in resting." She hesitated. "What will you do?" He looked out through the crack in the door. The last rim of daylight was fading beyond the ridge. "Wait," he said, "and hope they're slower than the truth." The girl lay down on the hay. The cowboy sat by the door, rifle across his knees. A lantern flickered low beside him, throwing his shadow tall against the boards. He thought about the boy's fear, about a town that didn't listen, about law that changed its face depending who spoke it. Somewhere in the distance thunder rolled, or maybe it was hooves. He rubbed his thumb across the wooden horse, feeling the small dents left by her knife. Each mark was a heartbeat, a kind of memory that didn't fade. He whispered to the night, "There's a time to hide, and a time to stand." And the wind outside whispered back through the slats, soft, uncertain, almost human. "You'll bring trouble here," the blacksmith warned, but the cowboy didn't move from the doorway. Morning light poured over the town like melted brass. The air smelled of iron and coal smoke. The blacksmith's forge hissed and spat, alive with fire. "She's just a girl," the cowboy said quietly. "And the law ain't looking for justice. It's looking for someone to blame. The blacksmith paused, hammer midair. You can't fight what the sheriff's paid to believe. I can stand where others don't, the cowboy answered. He laid the wooden horse on the workbench. Can you fix this string? The blacksmith studied the carving, frowning at the worn edges. A child made this. She remembers her father with it, said the cowboy. That's all that matters. The blacksmith softened. He took a piece of rawhide cord and began threading it carefully through the small hole in the horse's neck. You've got a heart for lost things, he said. Maybe I'm one, the cowboy murmured. Outside, the sheriff's voice echoed from the street. We're searching all barns and sheds. Apache girl seen near the creek. She's wanted for questioning. The blacksmith glanced up sharply. They'll check here next. The cowboy took the carving back, tucked it into his vest. Then I'd better leave before they do. Where will you go? Back to the barn, where truth still breathes. He stepped out into the street. The town looked the same as it always had. Dust swirling under wagon wheels, a saloon piano echoing through the morning, a preacher calling from the steps about sin and silver. But the eyes watching him were harder now. The sheriff spotted him. You seen anyone pass through, Kane? The cowboy met his gaze. Only ghosts, Sheriff. And they don't stop long. The sheriff studied him the way a man studies a riddle he doesn't like. If you're hiding her, it'll go bad for you. Kane, his name now spoken like a warning, nodded once. Maybe, but some things go worse if you don't. The sheriff turned away, muttering orders. Kane mounted his horse, the leather creaking in the sun. He rode out slow, the wooden horse swaying from his saddle horn. Behind him, the blacksmith called softly, Kane, truth cuts deeper than iron. He didn't answer. The wind did, and it carried dust and a sound that could have been hooves or could have been judgment. You should have left her, the sheriff growled, but the cowboy didn't even look at him. Evening was falling like smoke across the hills. The air was copper and cool. Kane had ridden back to the barn by the creek where the girl waited, sitting still among the hay, her eyes steady as river stones. They're close? She asked. Close enough to smell dust, he said. But we'll face them here. She stood, tying her hair back with the same twine she'd braided the night before. Her hands were calm, but her breathing was not. I don't want them hurt, she said. Even if they'd hurt me. Kane nodded. Then you'll tell them the truth yourself. He walked outside, checked the rifle, then leaned it against the fence. The last thing he wanted was a gunfight in front of a child. The sun was bleeding out behind the ridge, red against the sky. A dozen riders came down the trail, sheriff in front, a few ranchers behind, faces stiff with fear and certainty. The sheriff dismounted first. Kane, he said slowly, I asked you plain. Are you hiding her? Kane met his eyes. No, he said. I'm standing with her. A murmur ran through the men. She's wanted for theft, said one, and maybe worse. Kane motioned toward the girl who stepped from the doorway, barefoot, thin but proud. Tell them, he said. Her voice was small but clear. I took food. Only what was thrown away. My brother was sick. The men shifted uneasily. Someone spat in the dirt. She's no thief, Kane said. She's hungry. And the law don't feed the hungry, it feeds itself. The sheriff's face hardened. Don't test me, Kane. Not testing, Kane replied. Just telling. Silence spread. Only the wind spoke, moving through dry grass like breath through prayer. Finally, the sheriff took a slow step forward. His eyes found the carving tied to Kane's saddle. What's that? Kane untied it, held it out. A memory. Of her father. Carved by hands that never stole anything but a little piece. The sheriff stared at it for a long moment. Then he sighed, the sound of a man tired of the world he helped make. Take her, he said quietly, and go before morning. Some men ain't ready to see what's true. Kane nodded once. Truth doesn't wait for permission. The sheriff turned away. The riders followed, their hooves fading into dusk. Inside the barn, the girl's eyes shone wet in the lantern light. You didn't have to speak for me. Kane smiled faintly. Maybe not, but someone had to listen. The night grew still, full of unspoken things. They'll ride again at dawn, she whispered, but Kane was already saddling the horse. The stars were fading pale over the ridge. A soft mist hung above the creek bed. The barn looked smaller now, like a memory about to end. He handed her a wool coat, far too big for her shoulders. "You'll need this. It gets cold past the mesa." She clutched it close. "Where will you go?" He paused, tightening the cinch strap. "Where truth's still worth a bullet, I reckon." She frowned, not understanding. He gave a faint smile. "Don't worry. The world always finds a man like me." The girl looked toward the east where the first orange light touched the clouds. "You saved me," she said. Kane shook his head. "No, you stood. I just made sure someone saw it." They rode quietly for a while, down the old trail where cactus bloomed and morning wind smelled of sage. Coyotes followed from afar, curious, not hungry. By noon they reached the edge of an abandoned mine town. Boards hung loose from old buildings, saloon doors broken and swinging like ghosts that still had something to say. Kane stopped at a dry well, poured what was left of his water into her cup. "You'll head north," he said. "There's a mission 2 days away. They'll take you in." "And you?" she asked again. He looked out toward the desert. "The sheriff let us go, but men don't forget what makes them look wrong. Some will come. I'll meet 'em," her eyes filled. "They'll kill you." He reached for the small wooden horse and pressed it into her hands. "Then you'll remember me when you carve again." She shook her head. "It's yours." "No," he said softly. "It's yours again. It began with you. Let it end right." A low rumble rolled across the flat land, hoofbeats distant but sure. Kane turned his horse toward the sound. "Go now," he said. "Don't stop till the mission bell rings." The girl hesitated, then kicked her mare forward, tears cutting dust from her cheeks. The carving hung against her chest, the rawhide string catching light like a thin promise. Kane watched her disappear between the rocks, then turned to face the rising dust behind him. He drew his rifle, breathed slow, and whispered to the wind, "Truth don't hide, even when no one's left to tell it." The sun rose higher, white and merciless. The sound of horses grew louder, judgment coming on tired hooves. And Kane stood waiting, calm as an old tree. "It's over," the sheriff said, but the wind disagreed. It still carried the sound of a single shot echoing across the canyon. By the time the riders reached the ridge, the air was still again. Only the windmill creaked and the hawks turned slow above the barn. The sheriff dismounted, his boots sinking in the dust where Kane had stood. There was blood on the earth, not much. A hat, a rifle, and beside them, half buried in dirt, the broken rawhide string that once held a small wooden horse. The sheriff knelt, picked up the carving. It was cracked now, but the shape still lived inside it, rough, honest, unfinished. He closed his fist around it. A rancher behind him muttered, "Guess he's gone." The sheriff looked toward the far trail. "Men like him don't vanish," he said quietly. "They just ride quieter than the rest." Days later, word reached the mission north of the mesa. A thin girl with long black hair had arrived, carrying a small wooden horse tied to her wrist. She said a man had helped her reach safety, then rode back to face what others ran from. The priest asked his name. She hesitated, eyes on the horizon. "Kane," she whispered. "He told me truth rides slower, but it never stops." She stayed there, learning, carving, living. Sometimes in the evenings she'd sit by the open gate and carve new horses for the children, each one a little different. Each one carrying a story she never told. Years passed. Dust settled over the barn, the well, the forge. The town forgot the girl's name, but not the whisper that trailed after her. A man stood when others hid. One autumn morning, the sheriff, old now, slower, rode past the old creek. He found a tree there, tall and alone, with a wooden carving nailed into its trunk. A horse, smooth and new. Under it, carved deep with a knife, were 5 words. "Truth is to be seen." The sheriff smiled faintly, touched his hat, and rode on into the quiet. The wind lifted again, dry and clean, carrying dust, memory, and something like peace.